Right, welcome back. Today we will discuss some concepts on aerodynamics. Right, I really have not started the mathematical point of view in aerodynamics so far. However, we need to understand certain basics in order to enjoy aerodynamics. Okay, so let us start discussing the understanding aerodynamics. As usual, I acknowledge John D. Anderson's fundamentals of aerodynamics, right? So, in the last class, we had a discussion that CL is a coefficient of lift, CD is a coefficient of drag, and Cm is the moment coefficient. And all these depends upon the Reynolds number, Mach number, and angle of attack, right? In other way, the CL for a particular geometrical shape will be same, right? And CD, Cm also will be same for a particular geometrical shape. But if the Reynolds number changes, Mach number changes, and angle of attack changes, again the CL for the same geometry also changes. That is what the conclusion we have made in the last class. Now, there is a problem, you know that because of the shear stress due to the viscous nature and the pressure acting on the surface of the airfoil, you have the forces and moments, right? Now, the resultant force need to be placed somewhere in the airfoil, right? Now, I will ask a question. Say, if you tilt the airfoil to 3°, 4° angle of attack, whatever it is, where you will place the resultant, right? The question is where you will place the resultant force R, right?
Perpendicular to the center of gravity.
Means always perpendicular, because center of gravity is always acting downwards, right? So if it is perpendicular to the center of gravity, then it will be in the direction of the drag. That cannot be the resultant, right? So where we will place? So in the case where I have shown in the screen, where this is the airfoil and this is the point where the resultant acts, right? And you solve it in the axial direction A, and in the normal direction you take it as N. And here I draw XCP, right? You know what is XCP? XCP is the distance between the leading edge, right? Leading edge of the airfoil to the point where the center of pressure is located. Okay, what is center of pressure? The resultant of all the forces due to pressure and the shear stress acts is called the center of pressure, right? So the resultant force, that is because of the distributed pressure force and the shear force, is called the center of pressure, right? So center of pressure definition is clear, right? Because I told you that there is a lot of shear force acting, similarly the pressure force acting, and the resultant of all these forces acts at a particular point where you draw that as a resultant R, and this particular point is called the center of pressure. The resultant of all the pressure force and the skin friction force acts. Okay. And XCP is the distance between the point where the center of pressure is located to the leading edge, right? And MLE is the moment about the leading edge. Okay. So if I want to calculate the moment about the leading edge, I can write in this way: minus XCP into N dash, the force into the distance, right? So here we have a definition of XCP is equal to moment about the leading edge by n dash, right? Okay, now we know n dash, right? Now the definition of center of pressure is very clear now. The resultant of all the distributed load effectively acts on the body is the center of pressure. So, okay, we can think in this way. Say if this n dash, can this n dash be equated to L dash? When there is no difference in alpha, right? When there is no difference in angle of attack alpha, then you can write. So I should not say it is exactly 0, but it can be nearly 0, right? So if we consider that, then we can say that M L E by L dash, not N dash, or N dash and L dash is almost equal. Okay. So, okay, now my question is, what will be the location of center of pressure when we consider the force is 0? I want to say that the N dash and L dash decreases to a very low level, right? What will happen when there is almost 0 force, 0 L dash? Anyone can answer.
So it moves to infinity
Okay, so if
in the free stream, I guess.
dash, yeah, so when this L dash becomes 0 or very low, or it decreases, this increases, and it moves to infinity when it becomes 0. Okay, so we know the points. Center of pressure is the point on the body about which the aerodynamic moment is 0, right? Now, how can we think about other cases, right? When L dash becomes 0, the XCP, where the location of XCP is here, and this moves to somewhere infinity, right? Now, what about this case? So we can consider, say, the equivalent ways of specifying the forces and moments system in the airfoil. Let's see, the first one, the resultant is placed in the leading edge, right? Do you understand the resultant is placed in the leading edge? Right? So when we place the resultant at the leading edge, now the resultant is placed at the quarter chord point. What is quarter chord point? Because this whole length is chord C, and hence we consider this as a quarter chord point. Then resultant force at the center of pressure, right? So the resultant force under the center of pressure becomes same. Now, how can we write this equation? Moment about the leading edge. The moment about the leading edge can be written as, say, if C by 4 into L dash, right? C by 4 into L dash. This C by 4 into L dash, and the moment about the quarter chord point. And also it can be represented by XCPCL, right? XCPL dash. So just we need to know what it is, right? Moment about the center of pressure and moment about the leading edge, right? So we will play with these moments when we come back to the aerodynamic performance, right? Now, I want to ask one question. What will happen if angle of attack increases? We have a moment, right? What moment it is? when angle of attack increases, the airplane or the airplane wing or an airfoil encounter a moment. What moment it is?
Clockwise movement.
Oh, of course, clockwise moment. What is the name of that?
Sir, is it pitching moment?
Correct. So that is pitching moment, right? Do you remember pitching moment? Pitching moment, yawing moment, and
Rolling.
rolling moment, right? When we were discussing about the forces and moments, we need to know the lift force, drag force, and the moments are pitching, yawing, and rolling moment. So just the definition we need to know the center of pressure. Center of pressure is the point on the body about which the aerodynamic moment is zero, right? The aerodynamic moment is zero. It means that exactly the resultant forces at the center of pressure, right? So your moment becomes zero. Well, this is all about the aerodynamic forces and moments. Now we will have a discussion further on the further basics of the aerodynamics, right? So I say that it is a further basics of aerodynamics because throughout our aerodynamics course, more than 90%, we consider the flow, right? Whether we consider the flow as a continuum flow or a free molecular flow, it matters. So we need to learn a little about the continuum flow and what is free molecular flow, right? So say start with, let us consider a flow over a body. Say you can consider flow over any body, right? Say assume that this is the airfoil. And the circular cylinder also you can consider. So if you consider the circular cylinder, you should have the diameter, right? Say the diameter can be D. Now, if I consider an airfoil, I consider the chord C, right? That is the reference geometry. So, if you consider a cylinder of diameter D, then consider a fluid flow. You have a fluid flow, and we know that the fluid flow consists of individual molecules, right? So, the fluid flow consists of individual molecules and that are moving in a random motion. So, the mean distance that a molecule travels between the collision with the neighboring molecules is defined as the mean free path, right? You might have studied this mean free path in somewhere in starting of fluid mechanics or in your 12th standard physics probably, right? So we normally call that mean free path as lambda, right? So now we discuss about this lambda. Say if the lambda is of the order of magnitude smaller than the scale of the body, right? The scale of the body is normally compared with the diameter D or the chord length C, right? Or if you consider the whole airplane, then we can consider the length of the airplane probably, right? Length of the fuselage. So if the order of magnitude is smaller than the scale of the body, then the flow appears to be continuous, right? Now, say this particular flow, which is experienced as the continuous flow, is called continuum flow, right? This is the consideration, continuum flow. The definition is the molecules impact the body surface so frequently that the body cannot distinguish the individual molecular collision. And the surface feels that the fluid as a continuous medium. Such flow is called continuum flow, right? Then what happens if the fluid molecules come and hit one by one, right? Fluid molecules, if it hits the body continuously, and it makes the body to feel that the molecules are very much continuous, right? But what happens if it comes and hits one by one, right? So even if lambda is of the same order of the body scale, so you can see the distance between the one molecule and the another molecule is d. Now there is no frequent collision. In such a situation, the body experiences a kind of particle hitting every time. So such flow is called free molecular flow. Anyway, we will study the free molecular flow when we come to the hypersonic flow theory later, right? So, for example, if you want to consider the space shuttle, you need to consider the lambda, right? So, in the high speed flow or hypersonic flow, when you compare the geometry and when you compare the mean free path, is usually defined by a number called the Knudsen number, right? Okay, but we need not to think about that now. So in certain cases where you will feel that the flow is continuum as well as the free molecular flow, and such flow is called low density flow, right? So this low density flow also we will encounter in high speed aerodynamics, especially we will talk about that, to define the characteristics of the hypersonic flow later. So in the majority of the practical aerodynamic application, we consider the flow is continuous, and hence the flow is a continuum flow, right? So whenever some question is asked on continuum flow, you should explain that in terms of the mean free path and the characteristic length. The characteristic length may be a chord length c or the diameter d of a circular cylinder, right? Then, okay, low density and the molecular flows are just a small part of the total spectrum of aerodynamics, because we deal that only at hypersonic flow, right? So therefore, all our discussions in the aerodynamics, we will deal with continuum flow. That is, we will always treat the fluid as a continuous medium. Okay. Then the in-viscous and the viscous theory. Of course, we have already studied about what is in-viscid flow, what is viscous flow, but we need to go a little deeper in order to consider our basic studies with in-viscous flow, right? Say when a molecules move, even in a very random fashion, they obviously transport their mass, momentum, and energy from one location to the another location in the fluid, right? So this transport on molecular scale gives rise to the phenomenon of mass diffusion, viscosity, and the thermal conduction, right? And these properties are discussed separately in a way called transport phenomena, right? So what property? Mass diffusion, viscosity, and thermal conduction. And the mass diffusion and viscosity and thermal conduction as a transport phenomena is because of the molecules move very much in a random fashion and transport their mass, momentum, and energy, right? From one location to another location inside the fluid continuum, right? So for this purpose, we need to only to recognize that all the real flows exhibit in nature as a transport phenomena, right? So if such transport phenomena exists in a fluid flow, we can call that fluid flow as a viscous flow. So let us assume that there is no friction, no thermal conduction, or no diffusion. Then we can consider the inviscid flow, right? Then we consider the flow as a inviscid flow. So when somebody asks a question on viscous flow and inviscous flow in aerodynamics, we need to have such definition, right? Mass diffusion, thermal conduction, and viscosity, right? Then, okay, I told many practical problems we don't consider the transport phenomena, or we consider the flow as a inviscid flow, right? So we can consider an airfoil as usual, right? So this is an airfoil, right? So in the surface of the airfoil, there is a possibility of formation of thin boundary layer, right? So this boundary layer is because of viscous nature, right? Say for example, when you want to see the macroscopic approach, this is your, then you will have a flow like this, right? So you will have a boundary layer. So boundary layer on the surface. This is because of the viscous nature, right? So actually the flow adjacent to the surface is exhibiting the viscous nature. But what happened to the flow outside? Outside this point, probably. Outside this point, the flow is considered to be inviscid, right? So this is one of the reasons why we consider all our aerodynamic problem, not all, most of our aerodynamic problem as an assumption that we consider an inviscid flow. So theoretically, inviscid flow is approached in the limit as the Reynolds number goes to infinity, right? So what is a Reynolds number? The Reynolds number can be defined as rho Vd by mu, where your mu becomes 0 when the Reynolds number goes to infinity. So however, in most of the practical problems, right, many flows with high and finite Reynolds number can also be assumed as inviscid flow, right? So the reason is that the influence of friction, thermal conduction, and diffusion is very much limited to a thin adjacent layer, right? So this thin adjacent layer is subjected to this phenomena, right? So we can consider the flow as an inviscid flow, and we can do all our theoretical calculation by considering the assumption that it is an inviscid flow. Okay, now you may have a question. Okay, well, we are considering as an inviscid flow. What about the solution? Whether the solution is perfect? When we consider an inviscid flow, whether the solution is perfect, whether the solution is all right, there is a small error, right? What error? The non-consideration of the mass diffusion, thermal conduction, viscosity, and so on, right? Anyway, so okay, if we deal with the outside the boundary layer in most of the cases, we consider inviscid flow. Then for flow over a slender bodies, say for example a airfoil, right? The inviscid theory adequately predicts the pressure distribution and lift on the body and gives a valid representation of streamlines and the flow field away from the body, right? Say here the streamlines are given nicely, right? Even the location where we consider the flow is in viscous. However, because of the shear stress is a major source of aerodynamic drag in the slender bodies, the inviscid theories by themselves cannot adequately predict the total drag. So in these cases, we consider the total drag is only because of the pressure drag, but in the slender bodies, the shear stress dominates than the pressure drag in certain cases, and hence the total drag which is predicted by considering the inviscid flow is not adequate. So here you can see the flow separation, right? The flow separation is because of the viscous nature, right? And okay, there is a wake region. Once the wake region is formed, then you consider there is a change in pressure and all those things. But still, this is because of the skin friction, right? When the flow separation is happened because of the skin friction. So the similar case in the circular cylinder also, right? So the overall assumption is that only for the region adjacent to the solid surface, we have a flow which we need to consider the viscous nature. Beyond that, we need not to consider the viscous flow, and hence to certain aerodynamic bodies, the inviscous theory is adequate to predict the flow characteristics, right? Flow characteristics such as drag, lift, and streamlines. Okay, now, okay, we had a discussion before on Mach number regimes, but I would like to revisit it once again because in certain cases we need to consider both supersonic and subsonic, supersonic and transonic, and so on, right? So let us consider an airfoil where the free stream Mach number is less than 0.8, and you already know that M infinity is equal to V infinity by A infinity, right? And V infinity is the free stream velocity of the fluid, and A infinity is the speed of sound. So we had a discussion on why we need to consider the speed of sound in the last class. Okay, we can start. So when the Mach number is less than 0.8, the fluid flow can be considered as a subsonic flow. Now, what happens when the fluid velocity or a Mach number is between 0.8 and 1? So even the flow velocity is 0.8 Mach number, some point in the flow where you will have Mach number more than 1. What is that Mach number called? The free stream Mach number in which the surface Mach number reaches more than 1. Then the free stream Mach number is called? Anyone can answer?
Critical Mach number, right?
Yeah, that is the point, right? So that particular Mach number is called the critical Mach number, right? So beyond the critical Mach number, still the Mach number is less than 1, but some point somewhere in the flow you have the Mach number 1 is reached. This flow is called transonic flow, right? You have both subsonic flow and a supersonic flow in the flow field. Now this is another flow. Say the Mach number is more than 1 and the Mach number is between 1.2. What happens in the airfoil? There is a formation of bow shock. And you know very well, when there is a formation of bow shock, immediately you will have a Mach number region which is less than 1. And further, it is like the flow is having a Mach number more than 1, and then there is a trailing edge shock and so on. And you will study that in detail in compressible flow probably in the next semester. So this Mach number between 1 and 1.2, there lies a region of subsonic and supersonic in the flow regime. That flow is called transonic flow. What is the difference between the transonic flow here and the transonic flow here? Any idea?
So there's no formation of bow shocks in the first case.
Yeah, that's true. But what is the difference between these two? So this transonic flow, the transonic flow happens here, but still the flow is subsonic, right? You are right. There is no bow shock. Bow shock only forms when there is a supersonic flow. So that when somebody asks the transonic flow regime, normally it is safe to represent the Mach number between 0.8 to 1.2. Right? So this is the transonic flow regime. Okay. Now let us go to the supersonic flow. So this is a supersonic flow over a wedge having a wedge angle theta, and the free stream velocity is more than Mach number 1.2, and there exists a shock wave, right? And when there is a oblique shock, you can see the Mach number is greater than 1 in the downstream, and of course beyond that you have expansion shock, right? Expansion shock wave, and we will study all the characteristics. So throughout the flow field, we experience a supersonic flow, and hence this regime of flow is called supersonic flow regime, right? Then this is a hypersonic flow. Okay, anyway, you will study the characteristics in detail one by one in your semesters. When Mach number is more than 5, this is the rule of thumb. I say Mach number is more than 5. There is a thin hot shock layer with viscous interaction, and lot of chemical reactions takes place inside the shock because of the high temperature, right? High temperature, then the thin shock layer, vorticity interaction, then there is a possibility of viscous interaction. Because of very high temperature, the flow, say for example O2 will become 2O plus E minus, and that become chemically reacting flow. Right. So all these things happens in the hypersonic flow. At present, by rule of thumb, we can say that Mach number more than 5 is considered to be the hypersonic flow. But the definition of hypersonic flow with the Mach number more than 5 will change when you come across the hypersonic flow theory in the later semester. Okay. So that's all the flow regime, and we will be dealing with subsonic flow, right? Subsonic flow in this aerodynamics course. And transonic flow and supersonic flow you will be studying in the next semester, called compressible flow. And later you will study about the hypersonic flow in hypersonic flow theory. Right? So I stop at this point for the today's discussion. Right? Thank you.